When she did get dressed up, she wore suits that were tailored impeccably. She always wore a hat. On Halloween, she was popular in the neighborhood because she offered a bowl of pennies with the odd nickel and dime thrown in, and each of us kids got to reach in and get a handful of coins. But let your baseball fall into her yard, as it often did from the family of 9 across the alley and the budding athlete next door. And you could kiss that baseball goodbye because grandmother kept them. And she didn't give them to my brother and me either. Grandmother had rules. She liked children quiet, nice, and wearing clean clothes. Yet at Christmas, I think fondly of my beautiful, if not especially kind grandmother. And I think of her because I have the recipe for her ginger cookies. That's been a constant for Christmas for me throughout my life. I love what she's written in her flowing script. A cup of butter, a cup of sugar, 2 eggs, 3 teaspoons of soda in 4 teaspoons of vinegar, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of ginger. I always add another teaspoon of nutmeg, a cup of molasses, and then plenty of flour. Plenty of flour. It's the only direction she needed, and certainly she probably learned to make those at her mother's elbow. I love picturing that. And knowing that in the early 20th century, they did need plenty of flour rather than a specific amount, because the amount of flour depended on the humidity, it depended on the flour, where it was milled, and it also depended on the size of the eggs, which weren't standardized into medium, large, extra large, and jumbo for a number of more years. Grandmother made these cookies year-round. One of the redeeming virtues of going to her house was when she pulled the tin out and offered you a cookie. One cookie. There were never seconds. But no matter, they were delicious. Every bite, they were thin and they were crisp, and they had the perfect balance of molasses and spice. I never made the cookies with my grandmother. I learned to bake them with my mom. She taught me to use half sugar and half flour when rolling out the cookies to prevent adding too much flour to make the dough tough. Mom and I always made some in the petal shape to honor grandmother, but we had quite a selection. Thanks to my mom's grandmother, some tin cutters had been spot welded. We had fun shapes like a lion and a dog and a chicken, and a cat and a horse. We had Christmas trees and angels and Santa Claus and bells and stars and gingerbread men and women and children. Later, I added a buffalo cutter and a Southwest Adobe Mission Church just for variety. Another change I made in the recipe was to always roll them on parchment paper so there's no need to transfer the cookies before baking. One year in college, we made trees for the tree. My mom and I must have baked about 100 tree-shaped cookies, punched a hole in before we baked, ran a ribbon through, and hung them on the Christmas tree. When my niece and nephew, now in their 30s, were old enough, I baked Christmas cookies with them. You've all baked cookies with children you love. I love the year my artistic niece, made a rainbow trout out of the fish ornament, or the fish cutter. My nephew, a hunter, one year took the horse and fashioned it into a 12-point buck. And then there was the year where I tried to make my dream come true, which was to make a gingerbread house. My niece and nephew and I built the house, and it was a lopsided creation at best. Then Andy, my nephew, had the bright idea to make, out of marshmallows and pretzels, a Michelin-type man who rode a pretzel toboggan and crashed into the house. We ate it anyway. Ginger cookies crept into my professional life too. the first Christmas season of The Farmer, the Dakota Farmer, I was determined to feature a farm family making ginger cookie houses. I found a family in Amboy, Minnesota, and drove down, had them bake the cookies, had my camera clicking all the time. I got back to the office, had the film developed, and every single frame was faulty. The flash hadn't been set right. So I called Julie and asked if I could come back. I had to drive back. She had to bake again. We did the cookies and they ran in the magazine. The next summer, the editors sent me to photography school. I was always intrigued with Christmas baking traditions. One year at the Minneapolis Star, I wrote about Jerebeck's Bakery in St. Paul, where they made cinnamon stars, a classic German Bavarian Christmas cookie with powdered sugar, egg whites, and ground nuts. At Christmas, there were other kinds of stories, too. The mail order story for American Home magazine that I helped photograph during a July heat wave blackout in New York City. And then there was the monk who filled the order for fruitcake from the Trappist monastery in Kentucky. He commented on my name, Gunderson, meaning strong, and he wrote, "A good name to have going forth in the world." Their fruitcake was outstanding. While at Better Homes and Gardens, I produced an appetizer story. One of the recipes was a salmon stuffed bite-sized pastry. I developed the recipe on paper, and the test kitchen prepared it for the editor's critique. It passed. We did a photograph, and it was published in the magazine in a full-page spread feature. I don't recall a Christmas without ginger cookies and a clutch of other favorites. It's always deeply satisfying, even when a particular Christmas has been difficult for me. I've had a few when all I wanted for Christmas was January. We've all been there. Sometimes Christmas is excruciating. Sometimes Christmas cheer is excruciating. And Christmas becomes stressful always in our hurry-up world. In such circumstances, Christmas becomes a marathon of resistance, resisting the forced cheer in the mall's music and the TV commercials. Resist the disappointment. Resist the sheer force of the commercial aspect of Christmas that begins as early as September, and by the time Advent comes around, it's at full roar. But Christmas remains a season of celebration of Jesus' birth, of Mary and Joseph's faithfulness, of the shepherd's wonder, and of the king's gifts. And we celebrate with lights and songs and hospitality and food and cookies. We go to the kitchen to make cookies for our loved ones, for our friends, for ourselves. We make them with the children to teach them to bake, yes, but also to tell the stories that go along with Alice Hansen's Spritz, Liz Ahning's Kroomkaka, Aunt Minnie's Pfeffernuss, Isla's English Toffee, Kay Means's Divinity, my own biscotti recipe. We make Christmas. We keep Christmas. It's up to us. Over the weekend, in conversations with friends, in person, on Facebook, and via email, lots of us were baking, taking the time, making the effort. And the cookies taste good, don't they? Family and friends expect them, but more than that, or included in that, Christmas cookies tell a story. The story of a grandmother who wasn't especially kind, but she was a fabulous baker. And the story that has become my ginger cookies. You see, there's more to a Christmas cookie than butter, sugar, and eggs. And now I want to know, what's in your Christmas cookies story? Let's hear some of those stories. I asked you to bring your favorite recipes. Thank you for your Advent hospitality. I wish you a joyful Christmas with plenty of love, lots of stories, and of course, Christmas cookies. Merry Christmas.